Good morning or early afternoon to everyone, depending on where you are in the time zones. The time has changed since the last time we had a webinar here, so I hope everyone's adjusted quite nicely, springing forward. It's nice to have a new season upon us. Thank you all for joining this morning. I'm going to give it just a few seconds, maybe close to a minute or two, to let some of the attendees just roll in quite nicely. The numbers are looking quite good here this morning. We had about 160 people sign up for today's webinar, and so far we've got about 90 who have rolled in, and that number keeps climbing as I keep killing time here with my yammering. I do hope everyone is doing well, and we will get this show on the road very, very quickly. So let's see here. Just double checking a couple of things on my end. If you've sat with us for some of the other webinars we've done this year, you know that these are live, and so we do our best behind the scenes to make the magic happen here. And I'm going to go ahead and get the show on the road. So again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here today. Today's session, today's webinar is 5 ways to improve your inventory and warehouse management. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Katie Griffin. I am responsible for business development and marketing here at Spire, and I'm joined by Albert Amar of SwiftCount. Albert, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, everybody?
Good.
I guess
good.
they can't talk, so that's good. I can ask a question. They don't have to answer.
That's right. You can ask, but they might be answering, but we just don't hear them. So Albert is the general manager, also the founder of SwiftCount, and I'm very glad to have him here today. This will be a little bit different than what we've done before. We're going to do more of a conversation as opposed to half hour me, half hour Albert, and I hope that you all enjoy. A couple of housekeeping items that I always like to go through. Again, this is a live session, so hopefully the technology all stays intact. If I could just do a bit of a sound check, if you could raise your hand that you can hear us and you can see my monitor and you can see me as well as Albert, you should be able to raise your hand if you can do that. Oh, good. Thank you, Beverly. Brittany, thank you. Okay, great. So everyone can see and hear what's going on. So this is GoToWebinar. It's a little bit different than Zoom. The major difference is that you can see us, but we can't see you. We are producing these webinars on a monthly basis. So the end of Q1 is upon us. This is the last one for this quarter, but we have one planned every month, and you will see those on our events page at spiresystems.com. You won't see maybe all of them right away, but you will see next month's and some other events that we'll be hosting. So make sure that you check that page out. Attendees will get a certificate of attendance for being with us today, so that will come out to you post-webinar. And this is not a training event. We don't accept questions during this webinar, but we do encourage you to ask your Spire partner any questions that you have on the subject matter. Most of them are in the audience here today, and they would be happy to answer your questions and work with you on the topic of tips to help manage your inventory and warehouse. So we're just going to run through the agenda. What we're going to be talking about here today under that subject is the first thing, loss of inventory control. What are some of the most common signs of a loss of control in your inventory, as well your warehouse management? We're going to talk about garbage in, garbage out, right? The data that's coming into your systems, if it's garbage, then when you're pulling reports, that's what you're going to get. So we're going to talk about a few tips to help avoid that. We're also going to talk about inventory count, everyone's favorite time of year. We'll take a look at lot tracking and serialized tracking, the importance of those things. and how your business actually should be using that, or define how you should be using that, or if you are required to use that by government standards. And then we're going to talk about streamlining and automating your inventory. Again, it's not a training event, but you will walk away with some good tips and some good little gems. And Albert and I are going to do our best to provide you with as much info as we can. So before we get into the swing of things here, let's take a second to define inventory management and warehouse management, Albert. We're going to be talking about common issues that everyone faces, but I think it's important, Albert, and you probably see this quite often as well, where, people kind of lump the two in together, inventory and warehouse. And while they're synonymous, right? The inventory management is really dealing with the items and managing those items throughout the whole business, and being able to forecast trends, pricing, and different things like that, right? And
Correct,
then
absolutely.
you're the warehouse management expert, so tell us how that's a little bit different than inventory management.
So the warehouse management is more the actual physical operation of managing your warehouse, knowing what you have, knowing where it is, and actually giving tools to people in the warehouse. We call them boots on the ground, to see what's going on within the warehouse. So that doesn't encompass forecasting or min-max and all that. That's more the physical operation of picking, shipping, counting, and so on.
Perfect. Yeah. So while both have so much to do with one another, I think it's important to define them a little bit separately in terms of processes and management, right?
Correct.
So good. Thanks for that. So the first challenge that Albert and you and I were talking about is really the loss of inventory control. And we see that happen in various different ways, but some of the most common, three of the most common is, number one, human error, right? I'm only human. We all make mistakes. And so human error is a very common way that loss of inventory control happens. Warehouse floor has too much or too little inventory, so an imbalance of inventory there, and unknown or inaccurate locations, whether it's a bin or the wrong warehouse kind of a thing. And so let's talk a little bit about that. Human errors, Albert, a technician has misplaced an item, right? And that can lead to a very large discrepancy in terms of your inventory management. Somebody sells the wrong unit. I'm sure you've seen these things before, right?
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, it's I'm sure everybody that's on the call is very familiar with that, and that's probably one of the most common business problems is human error. Customer places an order, your system tells you that you have it, you go in the warehouse, you walk up and down the aisle trying to find it, somebody either misplaced it or it's behind another spot where it shouldn't have been, or you put something in front of it and you just don't see it, or you're distracted, whatever. So either you don't ship it because you don't have it, which obviously is a lost sale. The other issue is you're basically picking the wrong item because they look the same. So again, there is tools and things that allow you to make sure that you ship the right item. But if you ship the wrong item, it's a double whammy. Not only it costs you to bring it back, you don't have the item to ship to somebody else, and then you have a dissatisfied customer, and then you have to pay for return charges and so on. So I'm sure everybody's experienced that.
Yeah, I myself as a consumer have experienced that. I like shoes. If you've attended a webinar I've done before, I talk about shoes a lot. I ordered a pair of shoes from a well-known distribution company in Montreal. I got two left shoes, right? So so something was not being managed properly in their warehouse. And I think that, unknown or inaccurate locations, like we're talking about in the warehouse, or unknown stock amounts, there's a lot to be said about lack of transparency and communication in the software and in the processes that are being used to manage that. And I think that what we end up seeing as a consequence are audit issues, obviously loss of revenue, both by product costs and loss of time, loss of revenue, and inefficiencies that exist as well. Unhappy customers. I was not happy when I got two left sandals, I can tell you. And it was, very disappointing. And I don't think I've shopped there again, as a matter of fact, right? And I can't imagine being the person working in that warehouse and being, unmotivated because things are kind of confusing, or, all these other issues that we're talking about. So loss of inventory control can happen for a variety of reasons, but some of the most common issues are the ones that we're talking about here today. So one of the tips, Albert, that you and I have discussed is getting automated, right? Let's try to remove the opportunity to have human errors as much as possible. And you know, the audience today is going to hear that word over and over, I think. But one of the things is paperless, and you know, I digress. Paperless is a huge topic, right? I mean, it can go into a variety of different avenues, but as it pertains to inventory, we're talking about no more actual count sheets, right? Like no one's
Absolutely.
walking around doing this anymore, you know? The pick tickets concept, right? There's more automated, more sophisticated ways of doing that. Scratch pads and any kind of other post-it or sticker, or whatever the case may be, that just isn't practical, I think, anymore, Albert. Can you talk a bit about the role of the warehouse manager and how they can help to improve that process?
So basically, it all starts with having the proper processes and the proper people. So the warehouse manager basically becomes, once you implement a new system, the warehouse manager becomes the captain, and then the role changes dramatically from just ordering people around to go pick orders, to go count, to go whatever, to really have a system that is more automated, that dispatches the orders to the right pickers, dispatches not only the right pickers with the proper orders, but also where to go in the warehouse, has a view of where the products are if you have an electronic system that tells you where everything is located, and just basically have a tool that just allows you to just be more efficient. Basically, that's all. And again, I don't think we're talking about rocket science. I'm sure most people are kind of familiar with the concept. It's hard to get your business in the idea that, okay, this is what we're going to do. It seems like a big mountain to climb, but it actually is not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So being paperless is not as big of a obstacle to address as some people might think. And so we invite you to just, try to think about cutting out that paper if you are using it to manage your inventory in a variety of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question. So we talk about automation, we talk about scanning, right? Barcodes and scanning. So I have a question for our audience here. How many of you are actually using scanners to manage your warehouse? Or maybe you are using them, you can't live without them, you're completely automated, it's fantastic, or you're in the process of implementing scanners and being more contemporary and less paper oriented. Or maybe you're just, this is how we've always done it, we like our paper, and this is how we're going to stay, kind of a thing. Or maybe you're open to it, but you're still not using scanners. So I'm going to give everyone just a quick couple of seconds here to answer that. And I think it's interesting, from sales orders to inventory, all the way the life of an order can exist in a paperless world, really, Albert. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So 66% of you have voted. Get that vote in. What are you using over there? We want to know. We absolutely want to know. Great. I'm going to go ahead and end that poll here, and just give me 1 second. And let's share those results here. So Albert, can you see that 14% of people can't live without? Majority of our audience here today are not using scanners. So that tells us that you're still manually picking orders, manually going to find those. And I think that's an interesting outcome there, right, Albert?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you say? Yeah.
It is interesting. Now, not all businesses need them. I mean, again, depending on the type of items that you sell, some, like the first category here, some cannot live without them. If you have a big warehouse with stuff all over the place and you have the items located in more than 1 or 2 or 3 locations, if you use serial numbers, lot number, it becomes a huge advantage. So honestly, the numbers don't surprise me that much. That's what I would have expected. But obviously, once people find out about it, they can realize. A lot of people think it's very expensive to implement. It's actually not. It actually saves you money in the long run. But but we digress. They can later on.
We are. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on, the pros and cons of the way to do things. So you may know, audience, that in Spire, you do have the ability to scan barcodes or serial numbers, UPCs, etc. You can also manually enter them in. And Albert really is the barcode expert in our Spire world here. And so, Albert, I do want to ask you a little bit about barcodes and scanners. So for those of you who aren't using them, you know, there's a few different ways, right? So a barcode scanner, it's universal, Albert, right? So UPC codes and serial codes. So whether a product is coming from a different country or a different company or whatever the case may be, it's universal. Your scanner will be able to pick that up and be able to read the code, correct?
Absolutely. Well, the name of a barcode is UPC code, Universal Product Code, so by definition. So the main difference is that the two scanners that you're showing on that slide are what we call keyboard emulators. So basically what these do is they are just very, very fast typists. When you scan a barcode, for example, the one on the left, you scan the barcode, and all it does is it's feeding the system with the numbers that are showing at the bottom of the barcode, and then a program like Spire would be able to convert those items into the part number. So that's one type of scanning. The type of scanning that we're talking with automation is a little more sophisticated. It becomes more of a PDA or a mobile device that has the intelligence to do things with those barcodes, like apply them to sales orders and gives you a little more information. So implementing Spire scanning with just those scanners would just allow you to use a very quick way to enter data within Spire by using the scanner so that you don't have to type them in. Biggest advantage, obviously, is speed and accuracy. And then the next level would be to take it out of Spire by having a mobile device that is connected to Spire through the Spire API, but allows you the mobility to walk around the warehouse without carrying your computer around.
The freedom to walk around the warehouse, absolutely. But just the concept of scanners as opposed to manually entering things. So, right, so we're talking about something that's universal. It can be read. You don't have to worry about having one type or the other. Productivity for your staff will increase. Human errors will decrease. And again, time saving when we talk about productivity. And I think it's easier to train people. You know, the reality is unfortunately, unfortunately, the last few years, we've all gotten accustomed to scanning. You know, how to scan something is not an unknown thing anymore, right? It's quite easy to do. And when we talk about, again, bringing your employees up to speed, this is a very good way to do that. I think, Albert, that, you know, when I go shopping, again, if I'm shopping for something and at the grocery store even, right, and I bring an item to the checkout counter and the code can't read, you know, has that ever happened to anybody?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So try to imagine that in your business where you're trying to find something, but you can't find it because the item is not identified properly. So that's where scanning really makes a big difference. Try to imagine going to the grocery store without a scanner. I mean, you wouldn't even go. If a store didn't have scanners, you'd forget about it. So obviously it's a huge, again, I think we're,
yeah, absolutely. And so for those 63% of you in the audience today who are not using scanners, there's some really good reasons as to why you want to consider that, right? Tip number 2, in terms of loss of inventory control, don't let inventory pile up. And Albert, I'm not going to get too into the overstock thing, okay? But the issue of having too much inventory is an issue, right? And how you handle that, how you manage that, how you help to avoid having too much inventory is important, because the result in terms of having revenue or capital tied up is big, and you can lose, inventory loses value over time, as we all know. And if that capital is tied up, it's, you know, not able to be used somewhere else that could help growth or other efficiencies, right? Or investing in a scanner, for example, right? So in a perfect world, ideally, everybody would have would not have any non-stocked items. Everyone would know where everything is, but you know, we don't live in a perfect world, and we don't always know where everything is in the warehouse when it comes to what do we have on hand and what's in stock or what's not stocked. And I think that there's this SKU rationalization that everybody does in some way, shape, or form, right? And you know, SKU rationalization being that, you know, we decide what we're going to keep or what we're going to get rid of, but the way that people make those decisions is interesting. So I want to take just a quick second here to show just a couple of really cool things in Spire, and Albert, I'll come right back to you with that. So we all know that in Spire, the filters option is incredibly powerful. And when we talk about a little bit of a tip here to help manage your stock and kind of check on things, right in Spire with these filters, as you know, if you turn the filters on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask to see items that we have on hand that are greater than 0. Okay. And I'm also going to see, I want to know what has not been sold in about a year, right? So anything that hasn't been sold before March 16th, let's say, because I know that that's a good date in my sample data. And there we go. I can see items that are in stock that have not sold in over a year. And I'm a little concerned that I have all these blueberries that haven't sold in over a year. That means I have a bunch of rotten blueberries there somewhere. And I need to do something about that, right? So whether it's, you know, being able to pull up that information very quickly, very easily, you can query these kinds of things. And for example, if I then wanted to alert this and make it quite obvious to my colleagues so that I could choose to do something strategic with that after, and I'll talk about that in a second, I could say these are old items. So I just went over and I highlighted, if you saw that, I highlighted all of these items and I just went over to the edit button and I'm putting old items plus 365 days. Just, you know, you can name this much better than I could. I want the font to actually be white and I want the background to be red because I want to see this. And I don't want to have any back orders on this items, on all these items. I don't want to allow the return of rotten blueberries, of course. And then you can talk to your partner about other customizations here that are pertinent to you. But you can see that now these are highlighted and the human eye is trained to see color, right? And so if I'm working in inventory and I come across this and, you know, I don't want to sell rotten blueberries, this is a way to do that. And again, you can then talk to your partner. Maybe you want to do a promotion, you want to discount the prices, or maybe you just have to cut your losses and make sure that the value of those rotten blueberries is properly identified within your accounting, right? So I'm just going to go back over to our slide deck. Albert, too much and not enough inventory in the organization. This really shouldn't just be handled by anybody, right? What would you share as a tip to help manage this kind of challenge?
Again, it's all about warehouse and inventory management. I mean, that should be the responsibility of everybody within the company. I mean, most companies don't realize, but well, they do, but they don't keep it first thing in mind is that your inventory is usually your most valuable asset. I mean, that's what really your business can make it or break it based on inventory. And a lot of successful company, I've seen that numerous times where very successful companies don't spend as much focus on the inventory because things are really good. So if you're doing really well and your inventory is a little too high or too low, you're still making really good money, you still have a bunch of happy customers, that's great. Until times become a little more difficult, and that's when you have to tighten your belt. If your inventory is too high, then that's money that you don't have for other things that would help you in your business, like hiring and so on. So yeah, it's critical to have the right levels. And again, I'm sure most people in the audience know that, but keep it in mind and having the right tool to give you not only the ability to view your inventory all the time, using the tools in Spire like Katie demonstrated. That's a very good filter that you create. That's usually the first thing I demo when I try to show people Spire, and you save that filter so that you go and revisit it as often as possible, because old items, especially old blueberries, are not good for anyone.
Not good. Nobody wants old blueberries. So just so you guys know, you can save a filter, save filter as, you can name it, you can have it company-wide or just for yourself, and you can have it show up. I want it to show up in the module list, and I want to save that, and let's just call it old berries, because we're funny over here. And I want everyone in the company to see it. Now you can see over here that under inventory, that favorite report works very nicely. So I think it's about visibility. It's about proper management. You can plug along, like you said, but you need the right tools and you need to know how to use those tools, right?
Absolutely.
Location, 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 right? It's not just about where you want to open up your most successful business. Location in your warehouse, location amongst several warehouses, Albert. I mean, this is a huge thing. And when we talk about warehouse management, this is really your wheelhouse, your expertise. So 3 tips, Albert, in terms of properly managing location.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So usually whenever I start working with a customer that wants to implement location, so I always recommend to first draw a simple map of your warehouse. Everybody can do that because they're very familiar with their warehouse. And then just think of a naming convention that makes sense if you were to go up and down the aisles. I mean, basically, if you wanted to come to my house, I'd have to give you my address and you'd be able to put it in Google Maps and come to my house. If you want to find item A, B, C, D in your warehouse, ideally that item should reside in a location. So if I gave you his address, you'd be able to go through. So in a lot of cases, you can have a location for an item. You can have multiple locations for an item. You can have, typically the way that we recommend the system to be working is you have one location that would be your primary location. That's the location that you would put in Spire. And any backup location or secondary locations you can have within your warehouse. If you have visibility, then you're able to manage the item properly because you know where it is.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then proper labeling of shelves, let's say, within a primary location or a secondary location, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically, once you've mapped your warehouse, then the next step is to make sure that you label it correctly, that you print a barcode with the shelf number that you've created, create some kind of a license plate where you have all the different levels of the shelves at eye level so they can be easily scanned. We see very often where people have a great idea to label everything and then they put the label on the 5th shelf, which is 40 foot up in the air, and they say, oh, the scanner doesn't reach. So again, these are common sense. They're very simple, common sense things, but they make a huge difference.
Sure, for sure. And I think when we're selling anything, I mean, I'm sure there's people in the audience today that, you know, have worked in a warehouse, and the search for the small missing part, you know, I think, Albert, you shared with me an example of businesses in the HVAC industry, right? I mean, these machines can be quite large, and several parts that belong to those are quite large, but then you have all these tiny little brackets and pieces.
Absolutely.
Right?
And that smallest bracket can stop you from being able to install the $25,000 HVAC machine.
Yeah. So location, location, location. Absolutely. So all of that we just covered addresses, you know, loss of inventory control. And I hope that you all found that to be a little bit helpful for you. One of the other challenges that we've identified is the managing of the data, right? So we spent a lot of time talking about the warehouse and the environment over there. But managing the data, right? So let's talk garbage in, garbage out, like I said on the intros over there. Processes are dependent on human beings making decisions, right? And I don't think that we're ever going to lose that need to have a human decision being made. As intelligent as the software is, we do need to be able to make human decisions and react to them appropriately and quickly, unforeseen challenges that come up and all that stuff. However, the reality is we are human beings and human error does happen. So there's ways that we can put some parameters in place that will help control some of these human errors that happen. And again, I want to leave you all with a little bit of a tip here in Spire. So here's my rotten berries list, or old berries is what I called it. And I actually, you know what, after thinking about it, all of these rotten berries, I want to make sure that they're inactive. Okay, like I don't want anybody to sell these because that would be bad for business, right? So we're going to make sure that they're inactive. I'm going to save and close that. Now, I don't want a salesperson to see these inactive old berries anymore, and being able to have user privileges that again control what people can view can often help eliminate a lot of human errors. So under edit user settings, I've got Al here. Most of you might know Al, our CEO. I'm not going to mess with his privileges because I don't think he'd like that very much, but I'll go ahead and check on mine. And so I've got my user account here. I'm going to go right over to inventory, and I can toggle these up and down so that I see them in ascending or descending order. I happen to be a bit more familiar with this, but you can see there's a lot of privileges here that can be removed from me, but I don't want to see any more inactive inventory because I'm a salesperson and I jump the gun and I see it and I want to sell it. And, you know, we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to remove show inactive inventory from my privileges. I'm going to go ahead and save and close that. And I'm just going to exit the module and then come back into the module, and I'm going to pull my old berries list, and all the other stuff that I flagged is there, but you can see that the old berries are no longer there. They're there, I just can't see them. Okay, so when we talk about user privileges, you can decide based on who your staff is and what their role is, what kind of user privileges you want to be giving them. And that visual access, again, you can turn that on or off. That will help avoid these errors. The fact of the matter is, we all have an item that we don't want to sell, a GL count that we shouldn't be posting to, a customer that we shouldn't sell to, and a vendor that we shouldn't pay. And so when we make these things inactive and unable to be seen by certain staff members, we help to avoid those issues. And running those filtered reports often. I'm going to take another quick second here to just kind of play around with some old filters, not some old filters, but to show you another thing. So garbage in, garbage out. I want to know which of my items are manufactured in a particular country. So the country is unknown. Actually, what I want to know is I want to know how many of my items don't have the country of origin labeled in there. It's not in the system. So the manufactured country is unset. I have a lot here. I have a lot of them that I don't know where they came from. And so maybe I want to assign that task to somebody. Okay. You can do that within calendars. You can assign tasks. We're not going to get into that today, but ask your partner to help you out with that. And so maybe that's some data cleanup that somebody needs to address. The other thing I actually want to know is how many of these have a lot number on them and don't, because let's say I had shipped out the rotten blueberries by mistake, okay, and they didn't have a lot number, then I would want to know that, or they didn't have a serial number, I would want to know that, right? And so that's very important. Here I can see that I have X amount of inventory items that do have lot numbers, but I don't know what country they're from. And so again, you can see that there's quite a variety of different ways you can query and help clean up, again, your data if there is garbage that kind of exists. So user privileges, visual access, run those filtered reports, those queries. It's takes a little bit of thinking. Ask your partner to help you out, right? Albert, when we talk about, this is in the inventory module in Spire, obviously, and I'm behind my monitor and I'm at my desk, but this information is only as good as what actually is happening in the warehouse. So I hear you talk about boots on the ground a lot, Albert. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, basically, the people in the warehouse are really a key asset to the company. I mean, I've seen very often where you have the one or two guys that really know the warehouse inside out. They know where everything is. And it's great to have those people, and they're very useful, especially at inventory count or when you're looking for something. But you have to be cognizant of the fact that they're just human beings, and they may not be there one day, and they may not be available, or they may forget. So having the tools just give you, again, the ability to just not depend on one or two people. Everybody should be able to access all the information and have them at their fingertip. And just like on Inspire, you can obviously also control what they see and what they do using a mobile device if you obviously don't want them to do certain things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, boots on the ground, very important. The next challenge that we've identified, so we're offering you 5 tips. So we talk about 3 challenges, and this is the 3rd tip that we're going to end up throwing your way here. Inventory count, the dreaded inventory count. And the reality is that there's pretty much 4 to 5 different ways that one can go about this. I'm going to focus on 4. We're just going to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of each one. So manual completion. Those of you who aren't using scanners are probably very familiar with this. This is using paper count cards. I mean, still in Spire, you can go ahead and print an inventory count sheet if you'd like. One of the pros about this is that it's a lower cost, okay? So you're not investing in some of these more contemporary tools. You're printing paper. The materials don't have a huge expenditure associated with them. But the con here is that there's a big chance of errors. Like we keep talking about, we're only human, you know, we do make errors. And there's no uniformity to how it's being done. Okay, maybe everyone has the same kind of paper that they're checking off, but you know, somebody counts this way or somebody writes things in another way. So there's lack of consistency there. Electronic counting. So definitely using scanners, mobile devices, more contemporary way of applying this kind of technology, and it cuts down on errors significantly, right? Those human errors tend to go to the wayside because it's a computer that's doing that work for you. It does have a higher cost in terms of materials, but like Albert said earlier, you'd be surprised, you know, it's not a huge cost and can actually end up in the long run saving you time and money. So talk to your Spire partner if you're not using scanners about what kind of an ROI are you going to see if you do decide to adopt electronic counting and just barcode scanning as your operation continues. So cycle counting is another concept that we talk about when we're doing the inventory count. So this is breaking it down into different sections, and these sections can be by vendor. Let's say you want to just count all the items that you get from one particular vendor. Or if you want to do berries, you just want to know what all the berries, where all the berries are in your warehouse, you could do that. It does cut down on time because, again, you're managing it in segments. It helps with resources. You're not absorbing everybody in the office to do it, and your business can still operate while you're doing that. But you want to be careful because depending on your cycles, you can miss out on a count, right? It's not something you're sitting there doing all at once in a year. So maybe there's a segment of your inventory that you slipped your mind or you didn't account for. So process is really important and making sure that that's handled well. And then the all too familiar full inventory count, all hands on deck, right? Even the temps, we hire temps sometimes to help us get this work done. Maybe you call your mom or your brother in to help you at inventory time. It's a family affair most of the time. And the business just shuts down. Everyone, this is what we're doing. We get prepared for it. Maybe we order pizza at the end of the day. I don't know. It does help for a more accurate inventory count in a lot of ways, and it does help to prepare for the financial aspect of doing your inventory count. But again, it requires an operational shutdown, and maybe there's a time of year where that's better for your business or not. But it is labor intensive and it is time consuming, and again, does offer, you know, everyone having to do that. So want you to consider what those processes are. I'm going to go ahead and launch my second poll here, if you all will bear with me 1 second, because I'm curious to know, out of our audience, what kind of inventory count do you guys do? Is it the manual completion like I talked about earlier on, where you're out there in the warehouse with the count sheet? Is it electronic counting? So for those of you who are using scanners, I would imagine that you're using those scanners to do your inventory count. Is it cycle counting, breaking it up, segmenting it throughout the course of the year perhaps? Or are you all in, all hands on deck once a year? So I'll give everyone a chance to talk about that. Albert, I'm sure you've seen all kinds of different inventory counts. While our audience is taking a vote there, tell me what you think is the best solution for inventory count.
Well, obviously, I'm going to choose electronic counting because it's just a no-brainer in terms of the time. There is two main aspects to electronic counting that are a big advantage over manual completion, is especially if you're doing a full inventory. Number one is the fact that electronic counting, because of the fact that it's electronic, you get the data right away. So if you have to do a recount at the end of the day, if there's an error, you're going to see it before you have 500 little piece of paper that you have to reconcile, obviously. So you're able to see right away if something was counted wrong, if something was not counted, what sections of the warehouse are still remaining. So the electronic counting is just like a poll that you're doing right now. It just gives you a full view of the inventory as it happens. And then obviously the biggest advantage at the end is that, again, because it's electronic, you're just going to push it back to your system. Hopefully, once you're happy with all the reports and everything else, you're going to be able to push it back to your system electronically without having 2, 3, 4 days of people keying in all the information. So, but I mean, it's not really a choice between cycle and full. Those are two different processes, but yeah.
Yeah, and I see that. So those who are doing manual completion are probably also maybe doing the full inventory count, or maybe they're doing cycle count in a manual way. But a very small percentage of our audience is actually using an electronic method of doing an inventory count. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the poll that we had earlier, where I think it was only 14% of the audience were using scanners. And it's always interesting to see, from our audience, what kind of ways are you guys doing things, so thanks so much for sharing that, everyone. We're going to move right along here in our next slide. When we talk about inventory count, Albert, I really admire your expertise on this topic and warehouse management. So I really wanted to ask you some questions that I think sometimes are not so obvious to everyone. I mean, one question that I think everyone kind of knows the answer to here is, why is it such a nightmare? We talked a little bit about that earlier, but why is it such a nightmare? Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, number one, you're taking a big warehouse with a whole bunch of stuff, and now you have to count everything. You're taking people, usually you're going to do it on a weekend because you don't want to lose, you're going to start on a Friday night and work over the weekend. So that's nightmare number one. They're used to sitting at a desk in his office. You're going to make them go into a warehouse and climb on a ladder, and it's just not a night. Plus, it's a boring job. I mean, it's really boring. You're just going counting, and then you have to make sure everything else. And then the other nightmare, to be honest with you, that I've seen is the face of the owner at the end of the inventory count. When you see that all of a sudden your inventory is worth $150,000 less than what you think, and all you can think about is that, boy, I have to give that report to the bank on Tuesday morning, and you start having palpitations. It's just not a pleasant process. So if you could save 20-30% of the time doing it, I can guarantee you that it's well worth it. I'm actually surprised that only 5% do electronically. We have customers that use us only for inventory. We have customers that buy the system, that pay for it all year long, and they find it worthwhile just to do inventory. Once you start doing inventory count using electronic devices, it's like you forget how to do it any other way, because it's not really an option.
Right. And then it really isn't just about the software, right? It's also the processes that you have in place. So that scenario where you're talking about the owner who realizes he's, got $150,000 less of value in his inventory, and he's got to go and talk to the bank about that. Perhaps these things can be avoided if the processes along the way are managed in a sense that they complement the software, right? Because how you interact, right? How you interact with everything is hugely important, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, it's all about the training. It's all about making sure that everybody's on board. It's all about the process, and obviously that's something that the Spire partner and using the right system can really help you with.
And so taking the time to learn more about the functionalities that exist within Spire, as well as a product like yours, SwiftCount, for all those people who aren't using anything electronic in the audience, I would highly recommend that you talk to your partner. Albert, wouldn't you say the same?
Yeah, just learn about it. Just see if it's an option. I mean, again, depending on your type of inventory, sometimes it's not a huge deal and you can do it in 3 or 4 hours. So then it's not a huge advantage. But using a system where you can basically create a count, go on a mobile device, and like you see on this slide here, being able to see everything that you're supposed to count very quickly, go and count the items. And then on the next slide, you can see that if you're using a device that will allow you to scan with location, you select the item, you select the location, and then on the next slide, you can see that you can, once you enter the location, you can see a picture, you can see where it is, you enter your quantity, and then you complete the count, and then you can go to a portal that allows you to just review what everybody's counted at the same time. You're able to see who counted what, where. You can see right away if there is a discrepancy. You can focus on any issues before everybody's gone home and you think you're done for inventory, and you're still the owner looking at the report at 10 o'clock at night and realizing that the whole section of the warehouse or the top shelf of the rack in the back didn't get counted.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think that, this isn't as complicated as some people might think. If you're still doing things manually, you can see these screenshots over here. They're not hard to use, right? So tips about a full inventory count: have a process, right? Just to recap, make sure that you have a process, because your software could be fantastic, but maybe your strategy isn't the best, right? Create a checklist, not get away from the count sheet, but a checklist is very important. And choose your counters wisely. You know, we talked about everybody comes in, you bring in mom, you bring in your brother. Well, the reality is maybe mom isn't the best person to be helping you with inventory count. So choose your counters wisely. I think that's very important, and the right date and time. So annually, biannually, and then if you are involving everyone on staff, make sure that they are fully committed and that there is uniformity there, okay, that everyone is doing things the same way as best as we can. And Albert's tip about mapping your warehouse, visuals of the location, I mean, these things are really good strategies that help quite a bit. We're going to talk a little bit about cycle count in terms of inventory. I did see that a good portion of the audience is also doing cycle counts. And Albert, I mean, talk to me a little bit about the value in doing a cycle count over a full count like that.
Well, I don't think it's one against the other. I mean, the full count, usually most companies have to do it for financial reason. Either they have audited financial statement or they need to do that for their bank and just to make sure you have the right valuation of your inventory on your inventory. The cycle count is more to just allow you to manage the business on a day-to-day basis. I mean, in theory, an inventory is useless. In theory, you have an accounting system that says I have 4 of something, I sold 1, I have 3, I buy 2, I have 5. In theory, inventory is math. Everybody knows that in reality, that's not at all the case. So I call it inventory of validation. And the inventory just allows you to validate that what you have is what you should have, and what you have is where it should be. So if you know what you have and where it is, that's really what inventory management is. It sounds very simple, but everybody who has inventory knows that it's not that simple. So doing cycle counting based on the value of the item, making sure that the more expensive item or the one that have a longer lead time or the one that are more critical to your business are always correct, what you have is always correct, is basically a safeguard against running out and against running into issues.
Right. And I think if you're not doing cycle count, I think there's some important considerations here, right? So your SKUs, like how many SKUs are we talking about, and what is the turnover rate in the warehouse of these SKUs? Because if you have items that sell very, very quickly, then, you know, maybe it's not just the best idea to do that. The higher the rate of turnover, maybe it is better. Maybe the cycle count is more important to do it more frequently or by segment that way. And I think that, again, the scheduling and the consistency, like we talked about, is very important. You want to make sure that there aren't segments that you're forgetting, and that if you schedule it, you know, don't let anything throw you off. Just because it's a cycle count doesn't mean that you can push it off to another time of year if something else comes up, right? And then again, you know, upgrading that technology. And I think that that's the big message here, is the technology behind this can make your warehouse management and your inventory management so much easier, whether you are doing a full count or a cycle count. So very important. Lot and serialized tracking. This is another challenge that comes up when we talk about managing inventory and managing your warehouse. And so just to be clear, you know, lot tracking, knowing the numbers that are in your inventory, the dates of these items. We talk about first in, first out, but I'm sure that a lot of you also are familiar with not just FIFO, but FIST, right? First in, still there kind of thing. So, you know, this is a reality of inventory, right? And so lot tracking is hugely important when it comes to that, being able to have the traceability that's required for any product that is consumable that you're putting on you or digesting. And then serialized tracking, right? Either for parts or individual items within a larger batch of things. I mean, it's really important that these are managed well. Albert, when we're talking about managing serialized items in a warehouse, what kind of tips can you offer for our audience?
Obviously, serious tracking is a big thing for people that do need it, and depending on the type of items that you sell, sometimes the serial tracking has to happen in the warehouse. I know Spire gives you the ability to pick a serial number or a lot number when you create the order. Sometimes that's not practical. If you're selling things like fridges, for example, and you have 200 in stock, if you pre-assign a serial number, it's not going to happen for the picker to go and try to look through the 200 very massive item, which one is which. So ideally, you want to let the user select the serial number, especially serial number. Lot number is a little more tricky because it has an expiry date, but on serial number, you want to make sure that the user has the ability to go and grab the one that's going to be the most convenient. And you want to make sure that it not only scans that serial number, but it also pushes it. So for example, the image that you see here in SwiftCount, you're able to select a location, which is where you would go in the warehouse, and then you'd see all the serial numbers are in that location. Just make sure you pick the one. So it not only tells you what you have, where it is, but which serial number is in what location.
Yeah, again, the power of technology. So lot and serialized tracking, if you're not sure if your business should be using that, I have seen this before, and some of you might think, well, it's obvious, I need to have that, but it isn't so obvious to everybody. So if you're not sure, Inspection Canada has a whole list of questions that you should be asking yourself that can help you identify whether you should be using lot or serialized tracking. But it's another way that helps keep your processes contemporary. It avoids human error as well. Standardized method of itemizing things in your warehouse. Quality control, definitely a thing. And it's not just for products that need recalls or returns, but just staying compliant with, what the Food and Drug Inspection agencies have. I mean, that the consequences can be severe. So if you're not sure, I really encourage you to check that out and to adopt it. We've got barcodes and we've got QR codes and all that kind of stuff. And when we talk about automation and streamlining and being contemporary to help manage your warehouse, this is the final challenge that we still see. I mean, many of you in the audience openly share that you are still doing things on paper. The times have changed, the we've always done it this way because it's worked. Many of you have probably had very successful businesses for 30 plus years, and that's fantastic. But what worked for you so well 30 years ago is actually inhibiting growth or sustainability in a lot of ways, or putting you perhaps in the line of consequence. So just because you've always done it this way doesn't mean that it's still a good way. Albert, you've seen this so many times where many successful companies still use Excel to track the ins and Excel, the most popular accounting software in the world, right?
Absolutely.
And I think you and I have talked about that. The truth is that nobody is immune to illness or vacation or retirement or things changing. And so that we've always done it this way may not work, right? It's a time to consider some other things, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And a discussion never hurts. I mean, sometimes maybe you are doing it the right way, but it never hurts to bring in a consultant, to talk to your partner, to bring in somebody from our team to just review things with you. And if it works, great. If, look at options. That's all we're saying.
And consider your processes. We've talked about that quite a bit here today. Boots on the ground with contemporary technology, having somebody with their technology in the warehouse, those boots on the ground, being able to validate what it is that your Spire is telling you, and being able to do it this way with something like SwiftCount is just, again, I think that the advantages are really, really bountiful here. And I think that if you consider contemporary technology, talk to your partner about it and what processes you could improve internally to help manage that whole inventory thing. And at the end of the day, it does help to keep your business quite competitive. Okay. Back to shopping as a consumer here, we've all gotten used to the Amazon-like experience, right? Whether we're talking about e-commerce, which we'll have a webinar on e-commerce as well in the near future. But in terms of your inventory and warehouse management, your consumer is used to an Amazon-like experience. And that means that they're used to getting their order fast. They're used to having it delivered nice and everything's just at your fingertips. And we've become that way as a society. And so if your business is able to stay competitive and is able to pick the order, find the order, pick the order, process the order, ship the order, all of that stuff very quickly and efficiently because of the processes and technology that you have in place, you're going to retain those customers. They're not going to go and look for something somewhere else. I never went back to that company and bought more shoes, guys. It's the truth, right?
Well, you could have bought two right shoes and then you'd have two pair.
They were expensive shoes. So it's time to upgrade. Like it really is, barcodes, QR codes or from paper to scanners. I really invite you to think about how you can better your business. It's an investment that's worthwhile, and talk to your partners really about what that means. Okay. I think I have an image here, Albert, that as we're wrapping up, I want to talk about just a little bit of SwiftCount here and the day-to-day operations, because it's not just about your inventory count. You also have a few images with this particular item. It's a Zebra product. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? That's a preferred tool for you?
Yeah, basically, it's not just a preferred tool. So the advantage of using something like SwiftCount is then you have something like this. For example, there's many different scanners. We like this one, and we you know, because it works really well and it's fairly reasonably priced. But it gives you the ability to walk around the warehouse with a tool that's not too heavy, not too hard to use, very simple to operate, and then gives you visibility. So you're able to do, because the count and everything else we talked about is critical to do when you have to do it. But then the key is really to be able to have a system that you can use on a day-to-day basis. So on a day-to-day basis, what people use SwiftCount for is pick orders, receive purchase order, do transfers, do adjustments, do movements between the different places in within. And again, with a tool that's simple, that have, you know, just something else that you can have in your hands. You want to know what you have and where it is, you look at it right away, and hopefully it'll validate what's in Spire and just give you something that'll give you the ability to manage your inventory, so that the next time you do inventory, hopefully it's close enough to reality.
And it's you know, we obsess about it quite a bit, but it's not just the reset point. You know, if it needs to be maintained, and that accuracy needs to be
Absolutely.
ongoing, right?
It's an ongoing is a key, yes.
Ongoing. It's for life, guys. It's for life. So I think that these are some really good tools and tips that we've talked about here today. So we're going to wrap things up, but before we go, we've got some bonus tips for you. And so we've talked about what some of the common issues are here today, and I feel like most of the audience can relate to what it is that we've talked about, and hopefully the tips that we're offering to help resolve some of these common issues have been helpful to you. But there's some things at some point that become very niche about a business. Many of you here today are probably in the wholesale distribution industry. There might be some that are in light manufacturing and wholesale as well. And so you have a lot in common, but very early on, we can start to identify how you're unique in each of your own ways, whether it's what you make, what you sell, or how you make and sell what you do, right? And so, Albert, in your line of work, what are some of these niche requirements that you have seen people have?
Well, depending on the type of business, for example, we have a few customers are in the distribution business that sell online. So they may have things that need to be shipped very quickly and from a large warehouse. So things like wave picking, have the ability to be able to not only know where something is, but have it in multiple places, especially if there's sub items. Just being able to have the visibility to see what you have, where it is, not just from the warehouse or from the store, but from anywhere you are. You just pull out your device in your pocket and you're able to see everything. So having the ability to have additional requirements that would be more advanced, like dashboards and being able to see orders as they're being picked live, being able to pick multiple orders at once, receive large purchase order with multiple people receiving the same scanner. These are things that are a little more sophisticated that may not be required for all companies, but when you need it, it's good to know that it's available.
Mm-hmm. So when we talk about cloud-based, I believe that your solution is also, it's cloud-based. It's through Amazon Web Services, so that
Correct.
Anytime, anywhere kind of feeling is available to people who are interested. I think that when we talk about location, like just in the previous slide, your solution is able to really narrow down where in the warehouse something might be.
And you can have multiple locations for the same item. You can have unlimited number of locations for the same item. So if your items are all over the place, and depending on how the house is organized, it's
yeah. And I think one of the biggest things that I hear about often, especially at the more managerial level of warehouse management, is the ability to have a dashboard report. And I think this is where the enhancement is really nicely offered and complementary to Spire, is your solution when we talk about managing the warehouse for all of you warehouse managers out there, I think that a nice dashboard report is something that can help make your job a little bit easier on a day-to-day basis. And Albert, I'm sure your clients have received a lot of benefit from using something like that.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, you get a ton of really good value in Spire, but having something else that works with it and that talks to it and that shares the data, just like we do and some of the other partners do, is really about building a community of products that help enhance your business.
Mm-hmm. And I love that you said that, your Spire partners and the Spire community, everyone here is very dedicated to helping you enhance your business, enhance your use of Spire. So Albert, thank you so much for joining us here today. It was a pleasure to have this conversation with you. You really are the warehouse management barcode expert. And I've learned a lot from putting this together with you. So thank you. I know that our audience has as well. And for those of you that are in the audience today, there is a handout included that has a bit more information about SwiftCount, but by all means, I 100% encourage you to talk to your partner, either about your processes in warehouse management and inventory management, about using those filters that I showed you, about user privileges, making things inactive, not inactive. And then further, boots on the ground and having contemporary technology at your fingertips. Talk to your partner about that and how they can help you. They know Albert. They've been around for a while. If they don't know Albert, tell them to call me and I will introduce them to Albert. But absolutely, you can find this information on your website. Again, thanks everybody. Thank you to SwiftCount. Next webinar is Thursday, April 13th. So the beginning of Q2, we'll start our next series of webinars. We have our friends from Gemini Logic. We're going to be talking about Spire and CRM. So really strengthening and fostering client relationships. And we're going to be taking a look at some of the tips that exist in Spire and the integration with a really great CRM product that Gemini has made that happen for everyone. So check out our events page at spiresystems.com. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. I hope everyone has a fabulous rest of the day. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Katie.
Bye, Albert.
Bye.